we're not unfamiliar with your work. So let me ask you about a follow-up on a hearing that we had last year on the issue of pay parity. As you know, it's been a topic that the council was very involved in the prior budget. We're going to hear testimony later from public defenders. Do we have the graphic up? You know, when we talk about parity, we're not talking about parity with the private sector, and we're not talking about necessarily parity between the district attorneys and the public defenders. We're really talking at the very least parity between the public defenders and the district attorneys and other government attorneys. And so just like using the New York City Law Department as an example, on the screen is the average salary of the public defenders compared to attorneys at the Corporation Counsel. And it starts with a significant gap, 68,000 to 63,000, and that gap grows only wider. And I know you're aware of the problem because, as I said, we've had hearings on this, and it was a subject of much debate in last year's budget. So can you tell us, has MOCJ done any work since the pay parity hearing last year on what it would cost the city to bring our public defenders into parity with other comparable government lawyers?
So I guess I'd first like to say that the public defenders are obviously a crucial part of our justice system that goes without saying, actually, and they're an incredibly important part and partner for much of the criminal justice reform work that we do, and we value very much their work and work with them literally, I think, every day. Having said that, I think that we are actually in quite a dynamic situation with respect to the defenders' overall budgets. And I say that for a couple of reasons. First, we have just reached the conclusion of contract negotiations, and a new contract was started for the defenders on January 1 with a significant increase in their budget, so up about 13% from FY15. And while, of course, work cannot simply be measured by cases, I totally understand that both for the DAs and for the defenders, caseload is not the only measure. I would note that there has been a substantial reduction in caseload. In addition, the defender's budget is a little different from the DA's or indeed from Corp Counsel, in that there are multiple sources of funding for their offices. And most significantly for us, and this is why I say, among other reasons, that it's dynamic, is that the state, which has traditionally contributed some money to the defender's budget, has now stepped up in a very, very significant way through indigent legal services, with an increase of about $17 million that we anticipate over the course of the year. And while we don't have, and that will go up by some significant amount over the next 5 years, and while we don't have our specific allocation for New York City yet for next year, we are able to see what the statewide number looks like, which is double what it was for this year. So all of these are things that we are looking at. We are actively engaged with the defenders and with OMB, but there are complexities and a lot of moving parts right now.
I understand all of that, and I don't want to minimize it, but is there any progress that you can report from the hearing in October about what it would take to get us to some some notion of parity that MOCJ would think would be fair?
So that's exactly the work that's underway right now.
Is there some end date? Is there a report that you're going to produce? Is there some point that you can report back to the council and say, we've looked at it, here's what we think it will take, here's what we recommend, and will it be in this budget cycle?
So it's something that we're talking to OMB and to the defenders about now. As I said, there are a bunch of unknowns, including what the state budget is going to look like, and how, not state budget, but the contribution from the state is going to look like this year, next year, and over the next 4 years. So I can't give you a date.
Okay. You have questions?
Sure, just quickly, I wanted to go into the crisis management system quickly.
Sure.
So fiscal year 19, funding of $1.75 million for mobile trauma units. Can you just speak to some of the work mobile units are doing now, and
Yep.
what do you anticipate? How are you prioritizing the utilization of the mobile units? And then also, if you can speak to 1.4 million additionally being added to reach folks at the detention facility centers, including Rikers Island, Horizon Juvenile Center, and Crossroads Detention Center. Do you anticipate you'll also be expanding out into the juvenile facilities? So if you can speak to that.
Yep, so we have a lot to say on that, and my colleague Eric Cumberbatch will address some of those issues.
Yeah, I know. Do I have to be sworn in, sir?
Laura, you want to? Yes. You want to swear him in?
Although you could have the privilege. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to present on the MTU and the DOC Horizon and Crossroads
Just speak
pieces.
a little louder. We're being serenaded right now, which is good.
It's a beautiful song taking place behind me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present on the MTU, the DOC work that we're doing, and also the work in Horizon and Crossroad, all great pieces. The mobile trauma units, the MTUs as we call them, are units where we most importantly want to be on the scene and in areas where people have experienced traumatic events or any adverse occurrences. The unit will be equipped with grief counselors and other credible messengers that could really link people to services in real time, meeting them where they are. Oftentimes what we see, and especially around violent crime scenes, is just a law enforcement presence, and we want to have a presence that promotes healing. We know that hurt people are more likely to hurt other people, and we want to begin to heal environments and individuals immediately. We also want to have a long-standing footprint in communities when these things happen. We don't want to redirect and or tell people to just find services that may exist in their borough, but we're actually seeking to bring these services to the people on the ground. To date, we've made purchases of the MTU vehicles. In your borough, Queens, Life Camp has made their purchase of a mobile trauma unit, and we have 3 others that were purchased. We're in different stages or phases in terms of rollout. One is actually securing the physical vehicles, but they have been purchased. We have them, and we're working to equip them, wrap them, and get them on board. I think it will be one of the more unique pieces that New York City has that separates us nationally. So it's a game changer. The work that we're doing in DOC is in the Enhanced Secured Housing Unit, which houses a lot of the key influencers or key drivers of violence on Rikers Island. And really what we want to do is link them to credible messengers that we have across the crisis management system for a number of reasons. One, to work on behavior change in the place where we have access to the individual. Two, to promote healing within the facility. How do we begin to normalize healing amongst a very vulnerable population, oftentimes that cannot show emotion and or need to seek services, so to bring that. The other part is to really humanize the individuals and approach them understanding that oftentimes the perpetrator is the victim and vice versa. In doing that, it gives us great touch points to the individuals, but not only the individuals in the enhanced secured housing unit, but also their network, which may be part of driving violent crime in community. It also gives us a touch point to link individuals that are coming out of DOC custody to our other service providers in the crisis management system across the 5 boroughs. So it's a great touch point. For us, our office strives to be in every space where there's young people with risk factors, and it's our job to mitigate those levels of distress and disorder in their lives, in their community and network. We are doing work on Horizon. We have 2 teams working with the adolescent population. We have one team that's specifically focused on, again, the drivers, which is more gang-oriented and crew affiliation-oriented. And we have a second team in Horizons that's doing more so healing, a lot of youth empowerment workshops, a lot of coaching, and then still both organizations are linking to the networks that are on the ground and then linking these individuals back to supportive services.
And not just juveniles, correct?
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Crossroads, we work with the youngest population, and there's phenomenal work being done on supporting young people, helping those young people have vision and understanding of where they are in this continuum along the justice system, really working with family members to help them understand the justice system, and again, a lot of workshops around empowerment, support, and youth building. So we're in those spaces in a very intentional way with partners that reflect the population that we're working with, and a population that also has very similar background from their lifestyle.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Just last question for Liz. So I know you produced your cannabis report, and I'm sure you're still following the data, and the police commissioner was here earlier, and we still in New York City are summoning and arresting majority people of color for low-level marijuana offenses. What is your opinion on that? How are you working to sort of curtail this with the department, even as we look towards legalization in New York State?
Yeah. So we have seen a really pretty remarkable drop, both in marijuana arrests, also in criminal summonses, also in turnstile jumping. Criminal summonses are down 73% since the start of the administration. Turnstile jumping arrests also, down from 28,000 to about 6,000 last year. Marijuana has also dropped quite considerably. But you're right that the disparity numbers are incredibly disheartening. And that is why I said I think that we obviously must work every day, and I think my colleagues in the police department and the district attorney's office do work every day to try and reduce that disparity. But it's a much deeper problem than simply within the criminal justice system. And we need to have a much more affirmative approach. We need to do both things, lighten the touch, but we also need to have deep investments in education, play, physical space that are very much focused on promoting thriving neighborhoods. And I think one of the reasons why I think the work that the Office to Prevent Gun Violence is so important, and why why the Mayor's Action Plan for Neighborhood Safety is so important, is that it takes a much more affirmative view of what it means to promote safety. Safety being something different than simply reducing crime.
All righty, well, thank you for that. I know we have to move, but I just wanted to say only 25 white people were summoned and arrested in New York City last year for marijuana. It's just startling, you know, I mean, as someone who walks outside these gates and smells marijuana, people smoking it that don't look like me,
Yeah.
It's just astounding that we only found 25, and I don't want anybody to be arrested or summoned for it, but it just shows that we have still a long way to go. And if we're talking about closing Rikers Island in the realistic time frame, or sooner than what the current time frame is, we really have to get down and deep into these systematic issues that are still overburdening people of color and communities of color. So I want to thank you for the work you've done. I think we have moved the bar certainly forward, but we still have a long way to go to address the disparities in the justice system in our city. Thank you.
No question.
Well, one of the concerns that was raised when the mayor came out with the new marijuana policy was that the exemptions to that policy, the people who would still be arrested and charged with the misdemeanor, were people with prior or current criminal justice system involvement. And it was predicted that the racial disparities might actually increase, because which communities are more likely to have been over-policed and have that prior or current criminal justice system involvement. Have you considered rethinking those exemptions and doing away with them? I don't know why somebody's prior criminal justice system involvement would justify arresting them and charging them with a misdemeanor for smoking marijuana, and predictably, the disparity is actually growing.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely something that's worth looking at and considering why there are certain exemptions and not others. And I know it's something that the police department, as they do with many things, is, you know, looks at every day to see what the effect is.
All right, well, we obviously have a lot of other issues that we want to go through. The reality is they're probably better to be discussed at the staff level, and we will see you again in May for the executive budget. So I appreciate your waiting around, and I apologize if you feel that we've given you less of an opportunity to tout your successes than in regular years, but we do have the benefit of working closely with your office throughout the year. So there isn't very much that you do that is new to us, and we do appreciate the very many good things that you do.
Oh, thank you. Well, the work of my team and of all our partners, I think, speaks for itself. And obviously, as Councilman Richards pointed out, we have a very steep hill ahead of us, but hopefully a way forward.
All right. We will be in touch with follow-up questions, and we will see the team again in May. Thank you very much.
And let me just say, for members of the public who won't be able to testify today, that our budget hearings are going up until March 26th, and we are going to prioritize you being able to testify at hearings throughout the remainder of the budget process up to March 26th. So you'll be in touch if you can see our staffs after this hearing. We certainly will work very closely to ensure that that happens.
All right, so our next panel, and it's going to have to be the last panel for today, but I think it's an important one. Janet Sable from the Legal Aid Society, Jared Trujillo from Also, I think a legal aid attorney, Matt Connect, Neighborhood Defender Services, Justine Oberman for the Bronx Defenders, Lisa Schreibersdorf from Brooklyn Defender Services. Come have a seat, and we'll get going. Is Ms. Olderman testifying? There she is. You're up. Not necessarily, but you're sitting at the table. Okay. Good. All right. If you would. Okay. Good. If you would raise your right hand so we can get sworn in. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. Good. I think we'll start with legal aid. We'll put 3 minutes on the clock. If you urgently need to go beyond that, we will be flexible. At some point, though, you're going to be competing with bagpipes, and you're not going to win that fight.
The button. Okay. Again, thank you very much for inviting us to testify before the Council Committee on Justice System for the to talk about the preliminary budget and its impact on legal aid's clients and services. We thank you, Chairman Landsman and Chairman Richards, for this.
All right,
opportunity.
let me just stand corrected. We'll do 5 minutes.
Okay.
Each, okay.
Thank you. So legal aid, as you know, is much more than a law firm for clients who can't afford to pay for counsel. We're an indispensable component of the legal, social, and economic fabric of New York City. We capture that role because we capitalize on the diverse expertise, experience, and capabilities of more than 1,200 attorneys who work alongside over 900 social workers, investigators, paralegals, and support and administrative staff in our office, carrying a caseload of 300 legal matters a year. We take on more cases for more clients who cannot afford to pay for private counsel than any other legal services organization in the U.S. We rely on city funding to do this, and that's, of course, why we're here today. So just to cut to the chase, we're here and we're talking on behalf of all the public defender organizations because staff retention is an absolutely essential challenge to the viability and the continued success of legal aid and the other organizations. In order to attract and retain our highly skilled and dedicated staff, we seek restored and enhanced support from the city to ensure that we can continue to deliver high quality, comprehensive criminal defense and civil legal services. Our ability, so what we're asking for today is that you include $12 to $15 million for the Legal Aid Society in the 2020 budget, and that I believe I have the authority to speak on behalf of the other defender organizations to say that that would be a total of $25 to $30 million for all the defender organizations to bring us into parity with Corporation Counsel, the law department. We believe that the objections to or that MOCJ's concerns about whether this can be done or not are easily refuted. Contracts can be amended and always are, so the fact that we have negotiated contracts for the coming year is really not an impediment to increasing our budget. While intake is down, that's great for New York City, and we're happy to, that is the case, but the city has already committed to increasing the defense budget for the DA, and to increase the budget for the DAs to reflect pay parity with Corporation Counsel. If it can be done for the DAs, it can absolutely and must be done for us at the Legal Aid Society and among all the defender organizations. And further, the state money that was referred to that has been increased, the ILS money, Immigrant Legal Services, is by definition, by statute, not permitted to supplant the county's Gideon responsibility. So we don't think that there's any impediment to the city moving forward, and really no justification for the city not to embrace what is an absolutely crucial a crucial need for the defender organizations and for the Legal Aid Society as a whole. Our ability to compensate our staff is really limited by the monies that we receive from the city, and it is further limited by other distinctions that were not really mentioned by the mayor's office, and that is that we have to pay for rent, we have to pay for health care, we have to pay for pension benefits. Right now, Legal Aid spends 7.8% of its criminal defense budget on rent. We pay 17% of our budget on health insurance, and we pay 5% of our total budget goes to retirement benefits. Those are dollars that do not come out of the DA's budget and do not come out of Corp Counsel's budget, so when they get a pay increase, they're able to put it entirely to salaries, which we're not able to do. Look, I know there are a lot of people, so I'm going to cede some time to my colleague, the new president of the ALAA Association, but we cannot continue to underpay our staff, and so we reiterate our request of $12 to $15 million to bring legal aid into parity with Corporation Counsel and $25 to $30 million for the other defenders, and respectfully refer you to the rest of our written testimony for other issues relevant to the criminal defense practice.
Thank you. Sir.
Well, good evening. Thank you for inviting me here. My name is Jared Trujillo. I am the new president-elect of the Association of Legal Aid Attorneys, UAW 2325. I represent 1,200 members, and there's no way that you could talk about criminal justice without, or immigration justice, or fixing the school-to-prison pipeline, or really helping low-income New Yorkers at all, without talking about the way that my 1,200 members are compensated, and the fact that our pay is unequal, and it's a crisis, and it's leading to our members leaving. We meet people on the worst day of their lives, when they're locked in cages, and we're often their only hope to get them out. We meet children in foster care, in some of the worst situations of their lives, and we fight to represent them and to make them know that they're heard. We are the only hope for some folks that are migrants, that want to stay in a country that is the only home that they've known for their entire lives. We help people navigate the complicated labyrinth of the IRS, and we give them hope. But what else do we do? We're Lyft drivers. We're babysitters. We grade exams. We're tutors. We're delivery drivers. And we do all that because we don't have equal salaries, and we do all that because it's the only way for my 1,200 members to be able to afford to support themselves in this expensive city when we have unequal salaries and when we don't have pensions at all. I want to talk a bit about the debt, also about the student debt load of a lot of our members. Right now, 65% of our members have student debt, student loans, and these are necessary, a necessary cost of going to law school. Of that 65%, 20% owe between $50,000 and $100,000. 29% owe between $100,000 and $200,000. And 38% of our members owe over $200,000 worth of debt just to become lawyers. It is offensive for us to look across a courtroom at someone who works for the law department and see that they make more than us. It is offensive for someone who grew, particularly for our attorneys of color, who might have grew up in these communities, and they want to represent the members of those communities, and for the city to show us that our work is not as valuable as someone that works in corp counsel or the law department just because of who we represent. For the city to show us that us putting equity and time into representing low-income New Yorkers on the worst days of their lives, in the worst situation of their lives, and that's not compensated the same way that someone who works in the law department is, it's the reason why people leave. They leave because they don't feel that their work is dignified, or that the city sees the dignity of their work. And they often leave because life happens and because they just cannot afford to continue working at legal aid on our current salaries. They want to get married. So one of my members left just a few weeks ago because their dog got sick. They racked up a lot of credit card debt trying to care for their dog, and they just could not afford to do that on a legal aid salary. These are real stories. Along with our written testimony, we have the testimonials of 22 of my members. And it really shows you just the human side of how difficult it is for us to survive in this city, doing work that we really care about, representing the most marginalized folks of this city, how difficult that is to do with our salaries. It's the reason why 48% of my members leave after 10 years, because after 10 years, there's about a $17,000 pay gap in between what we're paid and what someone from the law department is paid. And that it's only exacerbated by the fact that we don't have defined pensions like they do. So I would ask, so first, thank you for your time. I would ask, though, that you read through our written submission to see the difficulties of a lot of my members as far as just trying to survive in this city, doing work that they truly love, that some of us are just forced out of because we can't afford to continue doing it. And with that, I would just ask that this body seriously look into pay parity for us, but also into a loan forgiveness program from the city because our debt loads are so high and they're only growing. Thank you.
Thank you.
I really just want to applaud what you just heard, because it was said so perfectly. I've had 2 people come to me recently and ask for an advance on their salary because they're getting evicted. And these are the kinds of stories that we hear every day. And thank you very much for coming and speaking on behalf of not even just only the legal aid attorneys, but all the attorneys that work and the staff that work in our offices. And I want to also reinforce that that if you could look at a student loan assistance program, which I think I brought up one time before, which we haven't really put together paperwork on that for you, but that I think would be a really profound impact. And there is some student loan assistance by the state, but it doesn't kick in until the 3rd year, and by that time people are so far behind, even, it helps them a little bit. And some of the federal programs are falling apart, where if they worked for 10 years, they could be forgiven, but they've had basically almost zero people getting that forgiveness. Hopefully, after this administration, that'll come back, and some people will have a chance to do it. So I'm Lisa Schreibersdorf, Executive Director of Brooklyn Defendant Services. I want to say that yes to everything that's been said. I would like to talk just directly about family defense practice, because this is a space where, in addition to pay parity, our budget is we are very, very short funded, and we would like the City Council to help us really try to make the mayor understand what it takes to do that representation. Despite dramatic increases in removals of children and family separation, where parent representation probably has one of the most significant impacts on how long children are separated from their families and how maybe whether they are in the first place and how long that lasts. That the representation that we give our clients has already been shown, in many places to have a dramatic impact on, reuniting families or keeping them together in the first place safely. So despite rising ACS removals and actions and filings, our funding did not rise at all from last year to this year. And it had already been cut last year from the year before. So I'm asking you to take a look. I think for all the defenders, and there are 4 defenders, CFR is not here today, but it's my office, Neighborhood Defender, Bronx Defenders. It's probably something like, I think we said about 10 million probably to set us right. There was just recently a report by the Commission on Parental Representation, which was created by Judge DeFiore, and they are recommending that you look at about 50 cases per attorney. I just want to say that I have more attorneys leaving my family practice than any other practice in my office, because on top of not being able to, and if we had had time, one of my employees was going to speak, on top of not being able to afford to live, they were also managing completely unmanageable caseloads in the most dire of circumstances where people are losing their children. And so we really do need the council to really make this commitment to talking very specifically about this one practice area and making sure that we are able to, basically do all the good work that we need to do for these people. These are the poorest and in many ways most vulnerable people. They are often mentally ill, drug addicted, struggling with poverty in ways that are really profound, and especially in a place like Brooklyn, Bronx, things that, Harlem, where gentrification is happening, and people are no longer able to live in housing that is suitable in many ways, even for children. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Matt.
Good evening. I'm Matt Connect. I'm the Managing Director at the Neighborhood Defender Service of Harlem. The issue of public defender compensation, what we've been talking about is pay parity, is an issue that's really critically important to all of our organizations. And so I am truly appreciative of the opportunity to come here today to talk to you guys about pay parity. I know that you all know this already, but I just want to make it clear that we're not here seeking a windfall for our staff. We're seeking a basic living wage that will allow our really talented and diverse staffs and the attorneys to do the work they love, for the clients that they love, in the city that they love. And they're just not able to do it long-term with the pay scale as it stands now. You heard a lot about the issues that go into sort of forcing lawyers out the door at 3 years, 5 years, 6 years. And certainly I agree with all of those statements. I would say from an organizational point of view, it's a tremendous blow to an organization to invest 3, 4, 5 years training staff, developing staff, investing time and resources into their professional development, only to see them then leave to go do the work someplace else where it's not as expensive to live or where the pay scale reflects the cost of living much better than it does here in this city. I also want to just highlight one issue that's sort of unique to Neighborhood Defender Service, which is a community-based office. We serve Northern Manhattan. All of our clients reside in Northern Manhattan. We at one time had a staff that lived primarily in Northern Manhattan, in the community that we serve. And our staff is being forced out of the community. Our clients and the community benefited greatly by attorneys who had relationships with churches, with other places of worship, with schools, with tenant associations, with other community groups. And as our staff finds it more and more difficult to live in Northern Manhattan, we run the risk of losing those relationships. And at the end of the day, that costs our clients. So we're here today asking for pay parity. I'd ask you to please take a close look at it. Please make sure that our staff has the ability to earn a living wage and take a look at the Corporation Council pay scale. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Justine Olderman, and I'm the Executive Director of the Bronx Defenders. You've heard, I think, 3 sort of categories of funding challenges that we are all facing. You've heard about failure to fund our programs at a sufficient level to meet our client needs. You've heard about the failure of our contracts to account for the increasing costs in salaries, rent, and healthcare, and pension. And you have heard about the issue with pay parity, and all of that is true for the Bronx Defenders. I want to add one other element in terms of one of the challenges that we all face, which is the limitation on the nature of the work that is contracted for by the city. And what I mean by that is that our contracts are usually restricted in the scope of services to representation between the courthouse walls. We are funded to represent people once a case is filed. And one of the other limitations and challenges that we find is the lack of funding for us to be able to do preventive advocacy work, to, in essence, create an off-ramp to the legal system and divert people away from court altogether. But rather than dig into all of those, because I think you have plenty of that in terms of what you've heard from today and what you'll have in our written testimony, I did just want to spend a moment, especially as closing out this hearing for today, to reflect on something that I've been thinking about, which is that we all come here every year with outstretched hands. Every year we come and make the case to all of you that we don't have enough money to do the important work that we're doing. And we're all super mindful of the fact that you have a lot of people and a lot of amazing organizations in this city that are coming to you, not just, the justice system organizations, but across the city saying, my work is important and my work matters. And I thought, well, what can we do today to help you understand why our work matters and why there should be an investment by the city in our programs? And I realized that at the core of why we come back here every year, I would say is a fundamental misunderstanding about who we are, what we do, what our value is, and what the impact is to the city. We are often thought of as being legal service providers. There's nothing wrong with that. It is an honorable profession. It is important work. But in many ways, that understanding is fundamentally flawed and insufficient. Legal services suggest that there is a need, and the city has an obligation, sometimes that's constitutional, sometimes it's not, to meet that need. And if that's the framework with which we come to the budget discussion and the framing around our funding needs, then of course it's just going to be, what can we eke out? How can we meet that need? How can we check that box and say, we have provided what we are obligated to provide? And so I guess I'd like to introduce a different way of thinking about it, and one that I am confident every service provider in this room feels is accurate, which is that we are not just legal service providers. We are in many ways laboratories for justice. We protect people's rights. We stand up against abuses. We uphold the dignity of New Yorkers in what has been referenced as some of their worst moments, and moments when they're facing the loss of custody of their children, the loss of their housing, their loss of employment, their loss of benefits, their loss of their liberty. We are there. We are proximate to the people. We are proximate to the problems. And not only that, we are the solution. If you just look at what has happened in this city because of the providers in this room, it's kind of astonishing. This groundbreaking NIFA program has increased the chances of detained immigrants winning their deportation case by 11%. In the report that just came out by MOCJ today, you're going to see that in the last year alone, access to counsel and housing court has decreased evictions by 14%. There are studies that show that public defense can actually reduce incarceration rates by 16% and incarceration lengths by 24% and pretrial detention by 9%, just based on having the right investment in public defense. And there's data from our own offices showing that when we do that preventive work, we can keep children safely at home in numbers that are like 80%. So what I encourage you to think about as you wrestle with what are understandably incredibly hard questions is that our role is much more than simply checking a box and meeting a need. We are literally in this room the change that this city wants to see. And it's not just for the individuals we stand next to and defend. It is not just, honestly, for this city. It's not just for this state. It is for the country. What we have already shown we can do just by investing in our organizations is transforming not only the way people are represented, it is transforming legal systems from one end of this country to the next. It is delivering justice. And so when grappling with the questions, I guess I just want to leave you with one framework, one question to ask yourselves as you decide, is it worth it to invest in these organizations? Is it worth it to give them the funding that they need? Because we are talking about a real investment. We are essentially talking about what is the change that we want to see in the world? And how much is that worth? Thank you.
Well, that's a very powerful statement, and what's so frustrating on our end of the table, and you know that we've been fighting alongside you, at least for the 5 years that I've had the committee, and I'm sure before then, is that we, city government, have asked you, at least over these last 5 years, to take on more and more responsibility, to be more than just defense counsel in the four corners of the courtroom. We have asked you to view yourselves as holistic providers of services, to relieve the city and to meet the burden that the city has in so many of our social and economic problems being channeled through the criminal justice system or the immigration justice system. And all of our defenders have responded remarkably. The things that all of your offices do, you are here testifying before this committee on a regular basis, on everything from immigration to housing to family court to you name it. And so it is profoundly frustrating that we have to fight with the mayor. We have to argue with the mayor's Office of Criminal Justice about the need to compensate your professionals appropriately so that they're able to do this work without taking a second or a third job or without having to leave before they've really blossomed. Thank you, sir. I remember we had a hearing, I would say it was about 2 years ago, before the RFP for the current contract was even finalized. And we had compelled MOCJ to include some notion of holistic services and wraparound services and whatever term you want to use. And it was profoundly disappointing when, despite all of the commitments that the mayor's office made, at the end of the day, they didn't provide the resources for you to really do what you do. You still do them. You figure out how to beg, borrow, and steal to make it happen. I'm very hopeful that this will be the year that we get some parity and some recognition of the work that you do so that you can keep on doing it. Because I don't think there's anyone in this building or any city agency that doubts or questions the value of the work that you do and its benefit to the city of New York. And the numbers that you recite about the percentage of people who are not being deported, the percentage of families who are not being separated, the percentage of people who are not sitting on Rikers Island because of the work that you do, we see that. So hopefully this will be the year.
Well, thank you for all of your support over the past years, and just being here today, we know that we're in the room with allies and supporters for our applications.
I agree with everything he said already.
I apologize for the sense of rush. We did move things around to make sure that you had an opportunity to speak today. This hearing is not going to be closed. It's going to be adjourned. We still have to hear from the Office of Civil Justice, and there are other legal services providers that we want to hear from, but I cannot think of a better way to close this portion of the hearing as the music grows louder and louder next door with the testimony of all of you. All right?
Thank you.
With that, we're going to adjourn the hearing until a later date. And let me also just take this opportunity to thank Rachel Kagan, my Chief of Staff and Counsel, for all the work that she does making this happen. Thank you.